help the finance controller, sir? Kira, Solazal Bola Maja. And Salamaraho, I,
Brigadier Sheriff Samase,
swear by Almighty God, that the evidence I shall give before this Committee of Parliament shall be the truth, and nothing else but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you, sir.
By way of progressing our proceedings, we shall ask you, Commander, to give us a presentation of your executive summary. Commander.
Ke a leboga modulasetulo le batlotlegi maloko a committee. Chairperson, I assume that the Executive Secretary as presented has been read. But I wish to, if that is the case, then speak more specifically to matters of concern from us at the Defence Force. And essentially the first matter, Chairperson, is what, in our view, is successive low levels of defense spending. Over the years, the defense budget itself has reduced, not just the defense budget, but the budget across government on account of particularly where procurements are done in Thank you, Chairperson. Particularly where procurements are done with foreign currency. The steady depreciation of the pool against foreign denominated currencies has the net effect of reducing budget allocations. Further to that, Chair, we have, since NDP 11, been trying to be very specific around the loss of capital defense capability. And the urgent and very serious need to recapacitate the Defence Force in order for it to be able to execute that mandate. And that has not been forthcoming. Consequently, Chairperson, we have serious capability gaps, some because operational threats have changed, but some primarily because we have not kept the same relative combat power throughout the years. So the airlifting of our national command authority, so our presidential fleet, is one such capability that is facing challenges. Air mobility in general is one such. Here we're looking at fixed tactical and strategic airlift, and then tactical heliborne operations have also been affected severely. Our air policing, Chairperson, is one such, and in particular the multi-role fighter capability is facing severe constraints. Our ground maneuver, and in particular our ground maneuver that represents key, together with air policing, that represents key deterrence capability, particularly for defense forces with a force structure similar to ourselves and a landmass as big as the landmass that we require to be able to defend, requires a capability of strategic being able to present strategic surprise, and consequently this has been eroded, meaning our deterrent capability is lost. Field fires also constitutes one such capability that we are facing challenges with. Then, Chairperson, dual use capabilities, particularly to enhance civil defense interventions from particularly natural disasters and any other such have been severely compromised. Chairperson, this happens in an era where, if you juxtaposition the emerging threats, it, in our view, cries out to a desperate need and a very urgent need to address some of these capabilities that I've been speaking to. In particular, the emerging multipolar world with a global focus on peer or near-peer rivalries or adversaries is particularly having dynamics within the third world that presents particular risk. In particular, one such risk is the acceptance or the undermining of the principle of territorial boundaries as particularly enshrined by the then Organization of African Unity, or now the AU, where colonial boundaries have become the boundaries that we accept. We see, particularly with the annexation of territories by those that have the means or have occupied certain pieces of land that would have otherwise belonged to certain countries globally. This is now acceptable to become, if you annex a piece of land, it then becomes part of your territory. We see the growing spread, particularly within Africa, to mention Cabo Delgado and Eastern DRC, threat of terror that presents itself particularly in ungoverned spaces. Ungoverned spaces, Chairperson, are exacerbated by a lack of government services, and in particular government security agencies, whether they be public security agencies such as the police or the Defence Force itself. And the Defence Force, in its capacity as, in particular, us aid to civil authority, our inability to support our government agencies presents such a threat, Chairperson. The now seemingly easy access of drone technology, and in particular weaponized drones by terror and rebel groups. These capabilities have, prior to this, been the preserve of state actors, and now increasingly non-state actors have easy access to this. A very clear manifestation of this is the current instability in Sudan, in the Horn of Africa, and some rebel movements within the rest of the Horn of Africa, having technology that was previously accessible only to states, and consequently could deliver the kind of terror that could only be owned and delivered by a state actor. Chairperson, finally, amongst the threats that I wish to mention in particular is cyber. And threats within the cyber domain have increased, not only perpetrated by state actors, but also by non-state actors, and some being non-state actors within, shall I say, groups that I have identified with either an ideology or a grievance of sorts, but some are within the domain of what could be called lone wolves. But this threat, particularly, Chairperson, has the distinct capability of having immense damage with catastrophic effects to governments, to civil society, and to businesses and other such private entities. Chairperson, we, with respect, again, going back to low defense spending, if I may bring the example of a country to which Botswana had recently been deployed, one of the key issues there was, in my view, a systemic underspending for that jurisdiction's defense force, stemming out of a advice by Western donor countries then to say, you've obtained peace, you're no longer having a civil war, let then the peace dividend pay rewards, and do not invest in defense capability, but rather invest elsewhere. Now, defense spending, I will always say, Chairperson, is a choice. It's a choice of a particular jurisdiction to determine how much it is that they will spend on their defense. But what is critical around that choice is that once the choice is made, it takes years to re-steer the ship and acquire the defense spending that could be required. So, for example, if we choose to ground our air policing capability, to reconstitute it takes an immense amount of time to train the air crews to be able to fly the platforms that would have been chosen or acquired then. It takes a significant amount of time in reconstituting the doctrinal approach of how these particular platforms, together with the rest of the service capabilities, will marry up to be able to deliver either the deterrent or the inherent repelling capability that a nation wishes to acquire. In particular, when we speak to defense capability, to air policing, as a jurisdiction, we have come from an era where, with the then apartheid government, the entire airspace of Botswana, from flight level 120, so 3 kilometers above ground level, was owned and controlled by apartheid Pretoria. And I lived through that time, and I know that the South African regime then flew over our territory with impunity. And there was nothing that we could do. No protest, no amount of protest could actually resolve that. It was a constant breach of our national sovereignty, and in particular a constant breach of our national sovereignty by a government pursuant to a policy to which we as a country were in strong opposition to. Additionally, what it meant is that Botswana's revenue, by controlling that airspace, was now going to a different jurisdiction. And that revenue of civil air traffic overflying our airspace, and then that civil air traffic in some cases coming to land within our airspace, was controlled and authorized by an entity that was not sovereign to ourselves. It is important to raise these, Chairperson, because without attending to these, eventually the Defence Force will just become an employment agency and will not be able to do and provide the mandate as prescribed by the Act. And that would be a travesty in our view. I hope I was clear, Chairperson, with that summary, essentially pleading to your committee as part of Parliament to introspect with respect to defence spending and hopefully understand the dire need to address some capability gaps. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Commander. You've been listening to the Commander. I shall now invite honourable members to engage with the Commander on the executive summary. Honourable members. Honourable Lesedi.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, Commander, and your team. I have some few questions. The first one, Commander, is may the BDF give an update on the SADC mission in Mozambique and the financial implications.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member Relistedi. I will try my level best. I might not be able to provide specifically issues of finance, the financial update, because I don't have them here with me. But it could be if allowed, the BDF is more than willing to present to this committee those particular finances. Chairperson, in answering the question, Honourable Relistedi, the BDF was part of SADC's mission in Mozambique. Initially, the Mozambican government required of member states individually to help them out with the situation in specifically the Cabo Delgado region. That specific problem, Chairperson, had been brewing for a number of years prior to when Mozambique in, I think, 2019 accepted that what was happening there was terrorism rather than just lawlessness. SADC, and in particular the SADC Defence Subcommittee, which is an organ of a sub-organ of the Organ on Politics, Defence and Security, had been saying and urging the Mozambicans to either pronounce it as we saw it from intelligence reports, that it was a terrorist activity. In particular, there were elements of it being a religiously based terror that was happening in Mozambique. But as I say, the government of Mozambique initially required member states to facilitate it as on a bilateral engagement. Botswana spoke very strongly and was supported by the rest of the other SADC members that as SADC we had already created the instruments for which SADC could be able to respond to a contingency such as that, and then trying to replicate them through a manner that is bilateral presented many challenges. Key amongst those was that we would, as individual countries, would not know what the other countries is providing support for. So we might end up with support in one area and a paucity of capabilities in another. Eventually Mozambique agreed, SADC then intervened, and in particular, because we, as SADC, felt we didn't have the forces to hold and occupy ground, it was agreed that the forces that need to go there were forces where, in military parlance, we would say a rapid deployable capability, meaning that this force would be sufficiently equipped and armed to be able to move swiftly, engage with Al-Suna wa Jamal, dislodge them in certain bases, and thereafter wait for follow-on forces, particularly provided by the host nation, to hold that ground and then release these forces to move further on and engage further capabilities. I will say, Chairperson, that the first 6 months of that engagement, SADC, in my view, and Botswana as a key contributor of forces, made very significant gains. We disrupted completely the logistical capability of Al-Suna wa Jamal. We disrupted the ability to for command and control. We disrupted the ability to recruit and train. We disrupted the ability to raid with impunity the countryside of Cabo Delgado. And all of these ended up with a significant fixing in military terms. In other words, making sure that your adversary is held in one position, fixing Al-Suna wa Jamal in a certain particular area that presented challenges for which SADC at that time was ill-equipped to be able to address. So it was a mountainous and part of Cabo Delgado, also a area with a lot of mangrove swamps, which presented challenges of how it is to uproot Al-Suna wa Jamal from that territory without the capability that could address it. But what it did present, Chairperson, was a unique situation where there was quite a lot of desertion from Al-Suna Jamal. There was a split in the command of Al-Suna Jamal. And from Botswana, we had also argued that, particularly with the unique situation where Mozambique was, that it could be possible that under that pressure, Mozambique could have offered significant concessions for even more of Al-Suna Jamal personnel to surrender to authorities, and once surrendered to authorities, no further action other than reintegration would take place. So those were the achievements, Chairperson. And as we leave, those achievements remain largely in place. But we were asked by the host nation to leave, and it no longer really mattered what we thought the host nation was capable of, but because they had said to us as region, thank you for the help, and now from now on we will be able to sustain ourselves. We are there. And now we don't really have a lot of visibility in that particular area, other than just intelligence reports stemming from information that you would then keep acquiring. But sometimes, of course, intelligence is, as you all know, members, is an estimation. It is not absolute truth. So that estimation may be correct. It may be slightly correct, or it could be very way off. I hope I've answered you.
Thank you. And justice to the
Yes, Chair. Yeah, we are a bill. The financial uta diramangomano or this committee, but available to this committee. What was the toll death?
Sorry, my mic is off. Commander, please make the financials available to committee secretariat. Thank you very much.
What was the death toll of the BDF soldiers in Mozambique, and also what the nature of the cause of the death? Okay, sir. The death toll, also the cause of the nature of cause of death.
Commander Ali Muitaze, officers. Too much movement.
Mr. Chairperson, when I think that's in a good way. Horar officer Wakao, who think because Pitimori record in Sagawe. Kikupahore, Kile had this information with Kitatake confirm for its accuracy. When something it's out of finance, when something might have happened. And then particularly the reason why I say so is sorry, it could be for some development expenditure and I expand where we are acquiring capability that we need at Mozambique, but we need as a defense force throughout. So it might not be accounted there, or it might be accounted elsewhere. May Chairperson, year 2021, 2022, we are allocated 200 million bula.
How much?
200 million pula.
Okay.
We used 134 million pula under development expenditure. And we had a recurrent budget expenditure of 66 million pula. The year 2022-2023, we are allocated 150 million pula. And all of that 150 million pula we used as a recurrent expenditure. And then the year 2023-2024, we used we were allocated 145 million pula and used that 145 million pula as recurrent expenditure. This makes a total allocation of 495 million pula was the total allocation, and the total recurrent expenditure was 361 million pula, whilst the development expenditure was 134 million pula. But we will, as I say, reconfirm.
Yes, once you have finalized the figures, please make them available to the committee secretariat.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Honorable said you are done, right?
No, I'm not. I'm not saying. Nah, okay,
Commander, you are over consulting now. Some of these things you should know. If you don't, then we shall receive further information through our secretaries.
Thank you, Chairperson.
I think so. I think we made a mistake by allowing them to come in, because now they are competing for the attention of the commander.
But 60 Chairperson, really said. We've had one contingent member who unfortunately one contingent member who what we call an accidental discharge. Accidental discharge, we put it accidentally. The other contingent member who actions of our enemy, so he died in action. And then one contingent member we so a total of 6.
Abola baruna. Kore at a time was 3. Kera no more incident.
I give chance sorry, before Gipola, Ibola Bahai Suaradi, Gipola.
Yes, sir. Let me ask the other one. May the BDF give a brief on the recent gender-based violent killings by officers? Maybe you provide an explanation on how the officers managed to get firearms to commit such violence and violent crimes.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. We have had a number of, and I have compiled some statistics here, Chairperson, anticipating that this could be a question leveled at us. We've had a number of incidences in which our members have either committed murder, have committed murder and then suicide, and I have not disaggregated this in terms of the tool with which they committed these acts with. But there's a total of 68 personnel who've committed murder. And then this 68, the 68 in ours from the year 2021 through to 2025. 68. Sorry, not 68, 86, sorry, 86, not 68, 86. From 2021 through to 2025. So, for example, 2025 we have a total of 5. One has committed suicide, so that is not exactly gender-based violence. They for whatever circumstances they took.
Commander, let me get you right here. Are you saying from 2021 there were 86 murder suicides or what?
Yes.
86.
A total of 86.
In the past 4 years?
In the past 4 years, yes. Now, statistically, this is 0.0478% of the total Defence Force capability. What we have...
but the number is huge, Commander. I mean, the statistics may be concealing the real seriousness of the problem, but at 86, that is a very worrying situation.
Again, the loss of any life is huge, Chairperson. That I will accept. But I think it's important that we have an understanding of the statistics so that they also guide what resources and interventions are put into place to be able to address that. Because we might address something that really does not require to be addressed in a particular fashion, particularly with paucity of resources. What have we done as the BDF? From way back, the BDF began with...
I don't quite get you there, Commander. What are you saying about the 86? You're saying you relate it to statistics so that you can then determine the interventions. But I wanted you to speak to the number 86 in the 4 years, and I don't quite hear you there.
I was clear, Chairperson, that the number is... I agree with you, the number is big.
Actually, it's massive.
Any person who loses their life in this manner, for us, it's one too many.
Yes.
Yes, and that I will accept. But what I'm trying to say is, from an institutional standpoint, Chairperson, we need to be informed by some computation of what this number actually means.
Just hold on. You know, your officers, as you present, are making some whispers that I think are distracting our attention to yourself. Could you please, officers, desist? We want to listen to you, the Commander.
And it's important to bring it down to, as I say, it's important to bring it down to a statistical understanding or a more detailed study of what really is the problem. Do we need to intervene in this manner, that manner, or the other manner? Otherwise, if we just go by the number and accept that the number is huge, we might put resources where resources actually could be significantly more better used elsewhere. So, for example, if I were to put it to you in terms of the statistical losses that we had, our intervention go Mozambique, that number is huge too. And as a percentage, even though I haven't calculated it, it could be significantly bigger than this problem. And so how you address it there and how you address it here in Garrison could be significantly different. But what we have done, Chairperson, is we have employed over the years, first of all, we began employing chaplaincy. We introduced the chaplaincy within the BDF and thought in some cases it could be matters of spiritual engagement that could particularly resolve that particular problem. It's not exclusively problems of the spiritual nature, nor is it exclusive that people who might have challenges this way are seeking spiritual counseling. We've consequently employed quite a significant number of social welfare officers who engage from a non-spiritual standpoint. Additionally, we now have in our employ a number of industrial psychologists who again engage in a number of these engagements. There's quite a significant number of, through those interventions, a significant number of people that I think have been facilitated, and part of those people that have been facilitated, some of whom were probably in the midst of committing what we would have, or what the BDF would have viewed as a penal offense. But because of these interventions and because of our desire to really resolve this problem, that penal offense is overlooked, and our primary desire is to address the imminent threat to either the individual's life or any other life associated with that particular individual. Finally, we've also, under HR, established an office of gender affairs that particularly addresses gender issues and matters that could come out of differences spawning out of interactions of these two genders. One of the key things, and not just exclusively, one of the key things that we've found is problematic is with some men failing to accept that they could have a spouse or a partner who earns significantly more than they do. And this has created issues of inferiority and issues stemming out of that. It's not the one and only. Some are just matters that we believe are exclusively self-centered and have nothing really to do with an inferior complex or any such matter. It will be just matters of outright
mathata a rona e go nna nako ke ra re ofisara wa thalosa sente mo re go utwa mme go ngwa makereng sentse o le go commander ke kope go itse gore me gone dithobolotse ba di tsaka tse leng gore ba hella ba go commita this kind of crimes ka tsona.
Two cases that I remember distinctly, Chairperson. One was an officer who ended up killing two people. He accessed the armory despite the protocols to armory, and essentially pulled rank on his subordinate or the armorer on the day, and said to him, he's been assigned a duty that requires of him to draw a weapon, and he was given that weapon. That is a clear breach of our protocols and regulations. And so identified, if not anything, an immediate need for resensitization of our personnel around protocols Sadiamari. The other also was taking a weapon for which the particular person was duly authorized because they were on duty, and then absconding with the weapon and then going and committing the offense. Now, that particular problem will be extremely difficult to resolve unless if there's heightened vigilance around the supervision, not just around the supervision, but also around the peer level engagement to see whether a colleague doesn't seem to be in good mental health or a mental state, to be able to begin to interrogate or intervene with a desire to counsel. Duties where Masole need to draw weapons will remain. And if it is not obvious or if signs are not visible that this individual unfortunate incidences like this will happen.
Mr. Chairman,
let's get other people to.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Commander. Honorable Monacheng from Lepulole.
Thank you. Yes, from Lepulole. Commander, may you? Okay, no. Let me start with this one. Which projects within the PDF were overrun, and by how much were they overrun? Also, maybe give an overview of such projects.
The commander is quite very lengthy and elaborate in his responses, so I'm going to ask honourable members to allow me to limit them to 2 questions each, because it's quite very lengthy and elaborate, and when you ask a question, he writes first. That also takes a bit of time.
But now it suggests the opposite of what you are saying, Mr. Chairman.
What are you suggesting?
You are saying we should ask 2 questions and then allow him to elaborate.
Yes.
I think we need just short
Go ahead, sir.
answers.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. The question.
Short questions.
Short question. You got it, I believe. And then can we just get a short answer, so that it is important for us to maximize the opportunity, the time.
Go ahead, sir. Oh,
You mean, Chairman, I have asked the question. I'll ask 2 more.
A follow-up. Okay. Go ahead, Commander. I got distracted.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Honourable Member, the very short answer is that I don't know. I would have to refer back to the detail. I'm happy there's no time span around which you are asking, so it'll be very difficult for me to I can answer in some thing, but I will not be able to say it's on its own. And so I Thanks.
Earlier on, you talked of foreign airplanes flying our territory, and in particular, you mentioned South Africa. And breaching our government sovereignty, what action do we take as a country in those instances?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I won't speak to the tactics, techniques, and procedures of interventions, but the bottom line in a very, very short response is, if you do not have the capability to intervene, you do nothing. If you do not have the capability to intervene, you can do nothing. That violation will happen with impunity, which is predominantly why I was making that plea in the first place.
What are your implications for the management and sustainability of the organization to meet its mandate? Maybe like public funds in the organization, are they used effectively and efficiently to address the challenges of the country according to the mandate of the organization?
I'm not too sure I'm absolutely certain about the question.
Are you able to meet your mandate? Are the funds used effectively? That's the question.
Thank you, sir. Are we able to meet the mandate? With what I said earlier on, no. We are falling far short of being able to meet our mandate and delivering the defense capability appropriately. So an example is Mirale Dirahat saying earlier on during the course of this year. Much as the troops were there, but the resources were not there to be able to do the rescues that the troops were very, very eager and pumped up to do. The plans existed, and we improvised as best as we could, but it's important not to improvise every time. When there's a particular piece of platform that could be able to address a particular challenge, because in so doing, you're also making sure that the intervention is as safe as is possible for the troops, even as you send them into harm's way.
So basically, Commander, you are saying you are slowly degenerating into an employment agency, if I may borrow a term. Would you say that?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay.
If we don't address it, we will go there.
Okay.
Yes.
Last one.
Thank you, sir.
It's a bit worrisome that you are not able to really meet your mandate. Are there maybe policies or laws that might be hindering you that you may wish they could be looked into?
No, there are no laws that stop defense spending, to the best of my knowledge. As I said, and in our teaching as we grow within the defense forces, or defense spending is a choice. So, for example, is public health spending. It's a choice. It's a choice of that nation to choose or how much they will fund education, how much they will fund whatever else that is competing with the many aspects that government needs to deliver on. The reality is at a certain point, you'd have paucities. Now, we are not saying we should be given everything, because no country is, even those that we are envious of, they have gaps. They have defense gaps that they cannot fill and will not probably be able to fill.
Let me just interrupt you there. Sometimes, you know, close to my being here, o tla itse gore o thuse ngwana a o nka gore o itse sa stroka go ngwana kere powers that be a dia tlhaloganya tota your concerns, your needs, your challenges, because as you are rightly saying, how much you are go health, a choice. A lot of which the challenges are health. Leadership really eats the challenges that you might be facing, which needs funding.
Chairperson, and I'm constrained to answer it in full because it would I would now be speaking to partisan political issues, and so I take and I hope that our engagements with the executive is as explicit as it needs to be understood. I take and I hope that our engagements with Parliament, like today, is as explicit and understood as it needs to be understood. But subsequently, at the end of the day, it is the political direction of the country to which funding is allocated, and whether our argument is sufficiently strong to carry the day or whatever the case might be, now that becomes a partisan political decision, and so unfortunately I can't. I don't want to delve into that space. It's not mine, and shall never be mine.
Thank you very much. Honorable Poraholo.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Good morning, Commander, Lieutenant General. First question, I'm somewhat of a stickler for clarity and would want to know if your organization, the PDF, has a clash with any of the agencies that we have in the country. My follow-up question will come after your answer.
Commander.
Can I answer it this way and say interagency cooperation is a vital component of government delivering services to its people. The defense mandate is not exclusively the privy of the Defence Force. Defense policy goes hand in hand with foreign policy very, very closely. Defense policy goes hand in hand with public safety policy, environmental policy, etc., etc. Within that preview, any jurisdiction will have professional differences. Have we had professional differences? Yes, we have professional differences with other agencies of our own government. Are those professional differences going to stop us, in my view, from delivering on government mandate? It will be a very unfortunate thing if that were to ever happen, but we have tried and continue to endeavor to make sure that professional differences don't interfere with us being able to deliver government services and capabilities as required by the mandates that we serve.
Thank you very much. You mentioned earlier the issue with the airspace. I'm interested to know who manages that space, who conducts surveillance on that space. Is it yourselves or it is CAAB?
Thank you, Chip. It's a dual functionality. Civil Aviation Authority has the mandate to manage that airspace for civil air traffic movements. Not only do they manage it, they also manage it and present all of the issues around its safe navigation and all of the issues around the collecting of revenues around the use of that airspace. The BDF is responsible for the non-violation of that airspace by either foreign actors or sometimes just lost aircrafts, which are termed stray aircrafts, and that's where we come in. Only in cases of outright war is that airspace transitioned to BDF for its control, and its control normally would be for its use pursuant to the contingency to which is being addressed nationally.
So we can be rest assured that the airspace is now secure under your control. Not any foreign agency.
In law, it is. In law, it is the exclusive control of Civil Aviation Authority. In fact, we control airspace above the Caprivi Strip, which is a decision by the Namibian government to, in the same way that that airspace was controlled previously by the South African government. When they gained independence, they decided that portion they will allow Botswana to continue to control. And to the best of my knowledge, we've never, for example, we have the discipline as BDF not to fly into that airspace because we view it as Namibian airspace, and if we wish to fly into it, even though it's controlled by Botswana, we would follow the due process to apply for the use of that airspace. Consequently, it's a situation that I think has been working well. At any point in time, Namibia may wish to have that airspace under their control.
Okay.
Yes, but policing it is a different matter altogether, Chairperson, which is what I earlier began speaking to, and some of the capabilities that are wanting.
You mentioned a challenge with spending. Would that have any impact in your communication capacity or ability as an army? Are you able to? Do you have in place modern and functional, accurate equipment for communication? Because I know it is a very important, critical aspect of any military in the world.
Thank you, Chairperson. I would really love to answer that question in a classified environment, Chairperson. There I could talk very, very freely and very candidly to yourself. And I humbly request that we put aside that question, either for a situation where we've invited the PAC to a briefing, a classified briefing by ourselves, or a joint sitting of the PAC with our other portfolio committee, and we can speak to those issues very, very candidly.
Yeah,
that's fine.
We shall explore the possibility of that a classified a briefing where we shall not be on camera. We shall.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think on this one you should be able to go into the one concerning staff, the staff welfare issue. We know there was public release to that effect that your former, ex-soldiers will be paid after there was some adjustment, recalculation of their pensions and all that. The first question would be, how many officers are affected, both serving and out? And how many have been paid? And those not paid, what could be the delay? And lastly, when should they be expecting their pay?
Thank you, Chairperson. Honourable Member, the BDF Act empowers the Commander with respect to active serving members. And with respect to retirees, the Commander, I am indeed involved, but I am not statutorily empowered for the engagements of the questions that you're asking. However, if the question is around the pensions and pension emoluments to retiring members of the BDF, it is the BDF that has engaged through time, engaged the Defence Council on this particular issue and raised through statistics, Chairperson, shown the Defence Council that members are retiring into poverty, particularly with the advent of the defined contribution scheme, having moved away from the defined benefit scheme, which was deliberately modeled to take care of a short investment horizon and a long residual life post employment by the BDF because of early retirement ages. The model of the defined contribution unfortunately doesn't model that. It was used to model an employee of government that retires at 60 years of service, and consequently it had a long investment horizon and a significantly lesser post-retirement life. What the BDF was able to do with the Defence Council's preceding Defence Councils was, first of all, a very sympathetic view by the Defence Councils that yes, we agree with you, this is a problem, it needs to be addressed. The problem is the costs involved to rectify. Then there were also, through the BDF Act, we re-looked at just retirement ages and increased retirement ages in certain categories by 2 years, which had the net effect of increasing net replacement ratio. In other words, the ratio between your salary post-retirement and your last salary whilst you're still employed. So that ratio, it had a net effect of increasing it by 10%. And in some cases, it was moving people from a 25% net replacement ratio to 35, etc., etc. But it was not enough. And one of the issues that had been put forth was the issue of the denominator. Late last year, government not only having agreed to that, agreed and codified it in law. And so all of those, and gracefully decided to backdate it. So all of those who had retired at the point of 1998 were able to have the pension emoluments recomputed with the net replacement ratio of N/375, which means the they earn essentially 20% more. And the reason why that 20% it had existed beforehand was just to take care of the early retirement ages. Now, all of this was administered by our then ministry. And as the BDF, we didn't have a say in the administering of this. And consequently, I cannot be able to say with confidence how many people have been paid, how much those people, the total number of, the total fiscal requirement is, and who is yet to be paid, and why haven't they been paid, or why those who have been paid because as BDF, we, as I said at the earlier on, essentially retirees. The commander doesn't have the purview of in law of retirees, but only active serving members.
But I think, in my view, that's a bit skewed law. Then, if you're only concerned with me for the period that I'm under your command, and things that or money that I was owed during the time I was under your command would not be your concern once I leave the camp. So, in your view, who would be best suited to fully advise on this? Because the members of the public, the former soldiers, are, in your own words, I mean, they retire in poverty. And what makes it even worse for them is that they had hope of some money coming in, and obviously that has an impact in somebody's mental health. So we need to be guided to who should actually be in a position to give us answers on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Botswana is not unique in having a law such as this. And a key issue around this is to free the commander from anything else that distracts him or her from the mandate of defending the country and responding to those contingencies as we speak. So if we were to address veterans affairs, that's a whole shall I say, ministry on its own.
That's not what I want you to dwell much on. I need you to go into the future as to address a problem that exists now.
I'm getting to that, and there was just to make sure that you understood why. But I was going to say to you, what actually obtains is that the BDF is involved in personal emoluments of any person who has left and has issues to take up with respect to those personal emoluments, particularly personal emoluments that are due from government. Those that are due from the pension fund, BDF has no say other than to make sure that it's submitted the files and any other documentation that Botswana Public Officers Pension Fund may require. And so those we duly do. And if a retired soldier needs a health issue to be addressed, the BDF will listen, will take him on board, will take him to a medical board to ascertain the extent to which there's a disability, and also find out if that disability is either attributable to us as the BDF, or as the BDF we've aggravated the disability, and consequently it informs compensations, and those the BDF will continue to do. So those we have not shied away from doing, even though, as I say, Veterans Affairs is a different mandate.
Thank you. My last question, still on the issue of welfare. there are some ex-officers or ex-soldiers who had to leave or part ways with the BDF on medical grounds. Some made the option to go on medical grounds. Some were boarded by medical staff. Are these people fully paid? If not, is it also an issue that the commander would not dwell much on because they are no longer serving in the army?
Historically, what we did with people that were boarded by a medical board is that, as I say, the medical board would advise from a medical standpoint whether the suitability of this individual to continue with military training, so the military active military service, and upon that they could recommend a medical discharge, medical separation, or a period of recuperation upon which a fresh board would sit to review and make a recommendation. Those we had paid. But in, I think, 2012, thereabout, we figured as the BDF that quite a significant number of our persons actually retired from the BDF without actually understanding fully their rights. And so we actively sought from retirees from way back that they come, particularly with medical conditions they might believe it is the BDF or is the employee within the BDF that caused those. We have gone through those, a significant portion of those, and assessed them. A significant number of them have been assessed and are now earning disability pay, and that disability pay was backdated to the separation. Sometimes it was the disability pay together with workmen's compensation that was paid. And we believe that that backlog no longer exists. However, retirees retire today in good health. And then 2 years, 3 years down the line, some medical condition emerges. And so we continue to remain available to those retirees to come for medical assessments, and those medical assessments to look at whatever it is that they are complaining about and see the attributability of the government's liability with respect to the BDF Act. And so I will not say that everybody is paid. We paid all those that we know we are due to pay, but we might not have paid some that could be eligible, but they themselves do not know that they are suffering a medical condition that requires payment. But what we do now out of process is that every person who retires goes through a medical assessment, and that a medical assessment hopefully will reveal conditions that might require payment of disability.
Thank you, Commander. I just, because this is a matter of very huge interest out there, the issue of the welfare of ex-servicemen and women. And I want to just clarify one or two things with you. One is that on matters pertaining to ex-servicemen, you may not necessarily be in a space to elaborate on those. And we are going to be hosting the Defense and Justice Ministry now, the Defense and Security Ministry now under State President. So are you saying that the questions we have about the welfare of ex-servicemen, State President, because is that what you are saying?
No, not exclusively, Chairperson. I've just answered a series of questions by Honorable Polo, which speak to welfare of ex-servicemen, for which the Act requires the BDF to address. What I was speaking to was the issue around pension.
Yes.
And the payment of that pension. Yes. I was saying it was handled by our ministry.
It was handled by the then Minister of Defence and Security. So they are better informed about the pensions issue.
The better placed chairperson to be able to answer those. I just gave a background of where it began with the BDF inputting whatever it needed to input with respect to the Defence Council. It may very well have been that the ministry would have said, well, it's a Veterans Affairs thing, so it will remain a Veterans Affairs thing. Or you could have said, the BDF, Lelona, you seem conflicted, so let's not have you administer this. Let's have a different entity administer it completely. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's not exclusively...
it's not exclusive, but largely the Ministry of State President would be able to answer questions around the pension.
Yes, the bits that he transferred went to State President because it was owned by, in the past, owned by Ministry of Defence and Security.
Yeah, we have invited them to come and address issues of defence and security, or the former Ministry of Defence and Security, so that they come here and maybe speak to those. But on the issue of pensions alone, there is a contention that the transfer to BPOPF contradicted the BDF Act. Could that be the case, insofar as you know?
Can I not answer, Chairperson, because the best I know is that this matter is still before court, that very question that you're asking. And so whatever my personal opinion or the collective opinion of the BDF, I think we should hold it to government, let the litigants resolve it either out of court or the court make a pronouncement on the same.
Taemela court pele.
E ke kopa re emele court
E gore gongwe tar ha isna go ntshang.
Ha e seno go ntsha karabo kana e tabile karabo tabo sa tlo go metara gore nna ka reng.
Now as commander ke tsa gore dio tsedingwe wa ditsi ke hanse ke le mo go ene mme gone wa itse gore go na le masola a duetsweng a sa tholeng a le mo tirong la sa duelwang. Just that basic one. We will go to the State President later on when they come. Wa itse gore le masola a duetsweng di kgantse di tsamaelana le pension la sa duelwa. You may not have the numbers, but do you know?
Yes, ke a itse ka gore ba bang ba ntekodisa. Ba ntekodisa nyana ke duetse. Nna ke a duela. Ba bang ba botsa nna gore ke eng ke sa duela.
Yes.
And unfortunately, ke ba araba hela ka tsela gore kana kanye ha se administering ke BDF, and consequently ha ke brief you, ha ke home. Honale, some of my staff that worked to support the ministry, but for me it's important to remain clear, not to interfere with the job of the ministry.
Okay.
If the ministry wished for the commander to be on board, then a formal briefing is given to the commander.
Harelemo parlamenting re ne re bolelwa gore go na le a veterans office go go lonako re dumela go twaya batho ba ileng gore ba retireile. Can you just explain how that office works and how it helps ex-servicemen?
There's a Veterans Affairs, there's an act,
Yes.
Honourable Chair, that Parliament passed, and the BDF had inputs in the generation of that particular act, and I think also there was some extensive consultation between the ministry and retirees themselves. So there's an act that should be established and thing. What I do know that was asked of me, the commander, was to second personnel to help establish that Veterans Affairs. We have done so. sometime last year we wanted to withdraw those personnel, thinking that we had helped the ministry move forwards with it, but they also continue to say that we needed to maintain those people. So those persons are there on attachment to the Veterans Affairs Office. And again, as I said earlier on, I have absolutely no control over the Veterans Affairs Office and its operations and who is being hired, who hasn't been hired, why it will be where it is, and all of those other questions that could emanate from that.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kgonegile.
Thank you, Chair. Redumedisitse, Commander-in-Chief. It is now clear that the saying that diamonds are not forever, it's true. The economy is not doing well, and we have to do little with what we have. And we have to do more with the little that we have. If one may ask, to avoid a scenario whereby the army becomes an employment agency rather than an army with its intended mandate that we know internationally, what are the strategic piecemeal qualitative interventions that you intend to make, implement, undertake in ensuring that the prioritized areas within the army are achieved, implemented, improved within the small budget that we have? And which are those prioritized areas?
Thank you very much, Ricky Koneri. The immediate thing is a national security strategy. A national security strategy, as BDF, we've really advocated this for a long time. I am the fourth commander who's come in advocating for this. And the reason really is twofold. One, in the past and probably even today, it is the BDF saying to government, government, you need this sort of insurance policy, if you may put it that way, as against government saying, these are my security concerns, and I want these addressed. And government, I am using it loosely to encompass all of those stakeholders who are involved in the securing Botswana are involved. So Parliament is a key stakeholder. So a national security strategy, though, helps particularly deliver mandate clarity. It helps also make sure that there is specific focus on where we must spend resources within the various agencies of government that are delivering the various mandates. So, for example, one way it is clear, our successive governments have said we will not be a weapons of mass destruction country. So it's clear to me as commander, I will waste no time and resources in funding that. I might reflect upon it as a threat and assess it as a threat and go back to government and say, what the threat implications are and the severity of that threat. But with respect to resourcing, there's none. And in the clear indication of mandate clarity, sometimes it resolves the question to which I was asked earlier on by Rep. Polaholo with respect to whether there are clashes within the different agencies of government. Probably stemming out of we believe we have this mandate, somebody else believes they have that mandate, and there's divergent strategic approaches to achieving what the mandate would be calling for. So that's one instrument that I think is non-monetary, but it's a huge dialogue in terms of making sure that there's confidence within the different agencies around their addressing what government really wants to be addressed.
Thank you. What hinders the concerned stakeholders from undertaking that dialogue? Given that it's not monetary, it does not need resources, just a dialogue.
I don't know. It would just be conjecture on my part. And that conjecture could be loss of mandate, and consequently loss of power, whatever the case might be. But again, I don't know. It's conjecture on my part.
In your view, who is supposed to be spearheading that dialogue?
This is, in our view, a Office of the President function. It's an Office of the President function because it brings about all of the government departments to be able to do that particular undertaking. Now, that undertaking sometimes is, if, for example, it was given my previous ministry, which was the case, sometimes it's difficult for that ministry to order Ministry X or Y to come and sit at the discussion table because they are horozontally equivalent and have no no supervisory or authoritative.
We have noted, Commander. We are running out of time. Sorry for that. Okay, one.
But just before that, the other question to that was, sorry, what other? The other chairperson and Hormone is fiscal. It's fiscal. There must be some level of spending such that we're at a point where if we spend below that particular point, we taper into a total inability to deliver a cohesive defence force capable of delivering the mandate as required. So the fiscal and non-fiscal issues.
Thank you. Okay, one. It's under whose mandate in terms of maintenance? Is it under your mandate as BDF, OP?
It is a BDF held asset, held, managed, flown, operated asset. And if I may speak to it, I spoke to it earlier on. The current aircraft, in truth, is inadequate for the job that it's supposed to do. It could be adequate for regional travel, but it's inadequate for long-haul, transcontinental, oceanic visits. The President or the National Command Authority is supposed to travel first class. The cabin size does not allow for a configuration of first class cabin for for the first citizen and his spouse. If you're going to then put in all of the other mandatory entourage, security detail, personal staff that the president would travel with, it does not have the office space for the president to be able to work on board with whomever key staff that he's traveling with. It does not have a cabin for.
Thank you, Commander.
So it's inadequate, and it needs to.
So it's not in terms of its capacity to fly long distance. It's an issue of not enough room. And have we realized that recently? Because presidents have been using Okiba.
No, this has been a lingering problem. This aircraft was acquired in 2017, delivered in 2019. It's been flying since. But I know that presidential aircrafts have been the subject of parliamentary debate. And again, I am constrained to say my views about the debates themselves because it'll then I'll be venturing into partisan politics.
Thank you.
But suffice to say, it is one of those platforms that very good for regional travel, not good for under 2 hours. It's fine. It'll work well. It'll deliver home. For flying more than 2 hours and expecting the passengers on board to, upon arrival, go straight to work. It's a tall order.
If it's a tall order and we undertake to access a different aircraft, for example, you have seen the president on Qatar Airways. We take it that you have hired Qatar Airways for him. Isn't it economic wise to try regional aircrafts because we have them in abundance regionally rather than go as far as Qatar where we are going to spend approximately 6 million when we could be spending maybe 2 million?
I can't speak to the aircraft that Mr. President traveled with on Sunday because I was not involved in that process. So I do not know the.
Okay, thank you.
The issues around it. What I do know, in the past, the BDF was involved in the process of procuring, and so I really
thank you, Commander.
To that, yes.
Okay, one has been to UK for a month recently, undergoing maintenance with 4 pilots. Is it now in a space to travel long distances, irrespective of the inconvenience of space within the aircraft? And how much did the maintenance cost?
The exact figure I can't be able to exactly remember it. In early March, we went to America for moving our head of state, and ended up in California. And on the leg that was supposed to fly to New York with our head of state, it developed a snag, which grounded it. One of its batteries was flat. When the crews came in for pre-flight performance checks, it was flat. They had to order a battery. The battery could only be delivered by the OEM the following day, so the president had to went to look for a different aircraft, Honorable America, and fly the president to New York for his onward thing. He was then.
Yeah, I was asking about the costs.
I'm getting there.
Now you are giving me report regarding his past travels. That is not the issue. The issue is cost. How much did it cost? Was it worth going that long route? Can't we do it regionally?
I'm trying to be able to answer that exact question, Chairperson, so that you fully understand Harare cost, because cost is also very relative. But it went, yes, indeed, for maintenance. And this maintenance was stemmed out of the fact that there was a noise coming out of its nose wheel strut. The nose wheel strut, when they're steering it to the right, there would have been a knocking sound. So the OEM asked for it to be flown to England for that check. They couldn't identify what the problem was, and they ended up saying to us that we needed to replace that nose wheel, either buy a new one, or as of the industry standard, they loan us one, they take this one, go and repair it, bring it back, and then fit it back in, or again, industry standard, they give us a repair.
Okay, thank you. Now you are...
I think, Commander, what he's saying is that you are maybe giving a detail that maybe you are not looking for.
Okay. But what I was trying to get back to is what aircrafts are mechanical. They will break down. It does not mean that they are no longer unflyable. That aircraft is still solidly flyable. It has
to take long distances.
It has
Thank
very
you.
little flying hours on it.
If we may move to the next question. You have a number of officers, staff who are on suspension and who are interdicted, but they are not receiving full salaries, contrary to the norm within the government enclave. Why are they not receiving full salaries on suspension and interdiction?
No, sir. To the best of my knowledge, no. And the people that are on interdiction are people who've committed very heinous crimes. So the murders, the suicides, sorry, not the suicides because they are no longer with us, but those murder cases, etc. We've stopped interdicting people because they were under investigation for a drunk driving issue. And then we've, the Act had empowered Commander Rao to, I think it was up to 50%, but 75% to withhold. It had empowered Commander to withhold a figure, but we reflected upon that, and it's really not military tradition to interdict Lesotho. Is to take him to trial if we believe that he's done something wrong or she's done something wrong, and have trial adjudicate and pass judgment as to whether that is he's done something wrong or not, and out of that act. So I get interdictile resaba duele. By these heinous crimes.
So in your knowledge, full salary?
Unless it all
Go ahead, Honorable.
The number of litigations within the BDF are rising, seriously so. That in itself, especially when you're talking civil litigations, it's about the rights to salaries, qualifications, remuneration, let's say di a oketsega hela thata within the BDF. That in itself point to disgruntlement or ya gola. What could be the source? The number of litigations and you as BDF, maybe you should introspect in terms of there might be something that's highly recent. Secondly, the last one, but it really related. The current government, it's a human rights oriented government, and the cases that we have before the courts, some you are settling them out of court, which is fine. Some you are not, but really same circumstances. In terms of isn't it wise for you to try and settle these cases out of court rather than go through this expensive route? Thank you.
Is it necessarily showing disgruntlement? I don't necessarily think so. We'd have to be informed by a study or what is it exactly showing. What it certainly is the case is that as a society we become litigious. So too will Masole in the same way believe in their rights in one way or the other. One could argue that some is a Lesole who is not in many ways Hongwe, fully ascribing to our values and ethos and traditions. But again, I can't say with certainty that that is the case. You'll have to be informed by a more in-depth study. Settling out of court, I think each case is settled because of its own merits. And so I don't know how they are the same circumstances. It could be the same circumstances from Ngwaba, but from the standpoint of BDF, there could be a very major legal issue that needs to be brought before court for court to pronounce, so that going forwards, that legal issue is not tested. I think it has already been tested, and it codifies it. So, for example, there was a case that we were ordered by government to stop this litigation, but the case for the BDF was to for the courts to pronounce as to what does a board of inquiry do. BDF, a board of inquiry, is an investigation to gather the facts. So at a board of inquiry, even though somebody can be represented by legal representation, there's nothing factual that the BDF can present before the board actually sits. Because the board is sitting to ask the question about what are the facts around circumstance A. So we didn't have the opportunity to have a court decide whether the BDF was right or the likely affected person was right. So it's important to have those. And
I just wanted to get you right there. Are you saying with this particular case, you are stopped from continuing with the case?
Yes.
And you say by government?
Yes, we are stopped then by the president in his capacity as president then.
Stopped by the president or by the attorney general, or who really comes in here?
By the president, and I guess he was acting in his capacity as commander-in-chief.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have a few of those cases where you are stopped by the president from proceeding?
No, it was just that one case that I recall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then it happened many, many years ago. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
It happened many years ago?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you very much. You took in issues around maybe even the discipline of servicemen. Can you just give me just an idea very quickly on military justice administration? And again, if a person has been through the military justice, are they also liable to appear again in our courts, public courts?
It is possible that you could go through a military justice trial.
Yes.
And have a court, I think, Mapodisi bring you before a civil court for some other thing. So the earlier
for a similar transgression,
I want to couch it properly because in legal terms, like it's essential. But what I'm trying to say is, for example, the case that we mentioned about an officer who took a weapon from the armory, deceiving the armorer, and then going to commit murder. Murder is and his own introduction for that. But really, BDF, we could or under false pretenses. And it's one built to the other, but I keep unnecessarily homo, and sometimes we shy away from doing that, but at other times we really would like to do that because we are appalled with the behavior and would like to make sure that it's clear to everybody, Moses Oling, together with the public, that this is something that we detest.
Yeah, just to determine the level of discipline in the army. In the past 2 years, for instance, how many people appeared at the court-martial?
Okay,
how many soldiers?
The court-martial has not been sitting, primarily because we have not been able to reconstitute it in line with the new act. The new
Which
act,
is 2018?
Yes, 2018. The new act requires that the Defence Council appoints the Director of Military Prosecutions, the Judge Advocate Generals. Court-martials, BDF, are a jury system as against the courts that Botswana generalizing a jury. So you need a person, a lawyer, to be appointed as a Judge Advocate General to be able to facilitate the members of the jury for that trial. Now, the difficulty has been around the Defence Council and the sitting of the Defence Council. We have names, and I believe whenever the minister is seized with this, eventually it will come through. We will be able to sit. So, the records. However, there have been what we call summary proceedings that have happened, and deep powers that they I can't speak to them with certainty.
Commander, it has been 7 years since the new revised Act of 2018. But you are saying the court-martial has not been sitting, and are you also saying the judge, what do you call him?
Judge advocates.
The overall person in the military justice has not been appointed?
No. The overall person in the military justice system has been appointed.
Okay. And what is the nomenclature? What do you call it?
He's the Judge Advocate General.
Judge Advocate General, all right.
Now I'm talking about Judge Advocates without the general at the end.
Oh, so you have Judge Advocate, or you have the general himself, but you don't have the Judge Advocate?
Yes, we have people that we've nominated, but the nomination was part of it was in the process of having the person who's currently the Judge Advocate General was the Director of Military Prosecutions. And so when the vacancy of Judge Advocate General came, he applied, and he was eventually recommended to the President. He was appointed. There was a vacancy there. Now, subsequent to that vacancy, we have had this stalled position of not being able to appoint the Director of Military Prosecutions and the Judge Advocates who will now sit in court.
Commander, for such an important structure, it was a function because of the constraints that you have just mentioned. More disciplining law and amasole tota every was not structure say long or say
it's problematic. It could engender situations where discipline deteriorates because people might think that those who commit what are clearly offences within the BDF Act go untouched. But we've tried by all levels with the use of the instrument, their summary proceedings, to make sure that was well.
Summary proceedings to me suggest elements of, strictness, yes, but also oppressive dimensions into it. Summary.
It is law, and it is from the benefit of the insights of Parliament that they made it law. And the reason for it, the primary reason for summary proceedings, is for a before they had thing, let's say like I'm peering. Wholly clear or Sabat gets out to legate. It really is a useful tool for commanders.
But it doesn't replace the.
It doesn't replace the
court martial in it.
And then subsequent to that, there are strict processes prescribed as to how a summary proceeding proceeds. The rights of that individual, particularly the rights of the individual to test the evidence against them, is abundant. And then there's a subsequent to that, there's what we call review for legal sufficiency. There's a lawyer who sits down and looks at that process, and he may say, or the individual's not given a right, or cross-examine and it's yatsul.
Yeah, I think that you should move in the direction of a court martial. I would call upon Honorable Diwa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Accounting officer, there is an allegation to the effect that half of the committed overtime allowance of officers is used to buy food for officers in the barracks. If this is true, one may want to know if food is not budgeted for.
Commander?
Sorry, Chairman. Sorry, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Khandele commander go pile gore go tsene batho ba babedi ba tla go mo kwalla. Jaanong ke bona commander a kwala kana nako ya rona e re bolaile. Ha se gore commander a rabe ba neng ba tsile ba tlo go mo kwalla ba tla mo kwalla. Bothata ke nako ya nong.
Nyame ke tsa gore wa ba kwala potso ra go rata a ya rabe ke style sa gagwe gongwe le nna ke bona se jana ko mme ke batla gore a re neele dikarabo tse di thapileng tota nonohile o go tsa go kwala commander o kwala thata ebile o kwala ka bonya honorable Diwa o budise potso commander Gati Masole ba ithekela dijo
Nasare ba ithekela dijo nare but you are committed over time. Whatsoever Madima has committed over time, you committed subsistence. Kyoren Naki is committed over time. There's a different computation there, computing. I think computing over time, so I keep in Sepozweki on a couple.
Yeah, actually, is committed subsistence allowance.
Thank you, sir. There's a government policy under the financial. Or finance member.
I you go to Sinte. Commanders.
When I finance, financial regulations, financial something, but when you can't be paid twice for the same thing. Now, Masole, when I Masole are nangin accommodation is allowing what bakai kapela baka home barekela dijo. Secondly, how we are tripping or rekela dijo. Le sole le how will it tripping, will go home. You can't be paid committed subsistence allowance or regular dijo in full. It will be will be in breach. Nelegabele repita halere the Botswana rediraya. Who heles a tormenta do mera hore. Okay. Abahiwe half that amount and the other half. BDF reckon the Jocadon Eleva feed and Cuba Linti. Good tripping.
So it is true.
I don't think I understood you.
Who are Maruri or Masole? Why there is a one taboo? Teddy Caso Dimo or we take a ladijo.
Yeah.
Yes.
Issue Kore Masole, Botswana Kore Baduela certain subsistence Jagabu. But they are paid half. Half way, say you are ever regular the Joko di barracks in Lekai. A dijo had the budget table.
Arabi.
Unquay well, Commander. We are a Gatsala here, carrying
Arabi. Masole. Whether we let tripping up or how I are tripping, we here committed subsistence allowance at the rate of 50%. So this is Lele Hana. Let's say in tripping, Lele, for example, Bergamo, more office yakan. But Nahaki, I home, this is for other ranks. So from how to Wamuhala Madia. But her tripping, he's not going to go for trip. Now, the Solela Yamuhel. The reason why it has been put at half, pegged at half, was to worry. For the Solele and tripping. Rather than pay him subsistence allowance, and then ask him for a harimo patron avare que surigeta antike kushupungi or regadijo kapugi kapel. That would be inconsistent with the delivery of the tactical deployment that we are at. So rather than have a situation like that, Arba dwell in this committed subsistence allowance, and then at 50%, but Rona really hormente have the mandate of providing them dijo, and consequently also have the ability to say, in line with an operational undertaking hormone, to say, or for example, feeding policy for that operation key. So I could say, or necessarily, no, so Madia or I or regular dijo kaone. Kimadia satingo or onarly BDF. The Hiwa Madia from the outset, what the Madia Kawa or regular dijo. How that zero go le sole X.
You are saying you buy food for soldiers, how will it be? But at the same time, where you take 50% of their committed subsistence allowance. So can you clarify this? Can I keep double? You buy for them, and at the same time you take their 50% lower regular diju.
Yeah, I did say 50%. Even I didn't get them 50% too. It's withheld government, and it never comes to us. But the media because we have withheld 50% Kohomo. We went to government with a situation where we deploy troops on operations. Our CONOPS, our concept of operation, is where food should be provided by government so that it does not become an issue. Ke nako yano ya gore ke ye go ja ke kopa gore wena commandera wa ka o ke le mo patrolling ko Zibadianja o ntetelele ke tsamaye ke ye go reka dijo ko Boro, where the case might be.
Can you clarify this? Is this done out of their consent? It's just a decision made by BDF? Were they consulted about
it is a condition that was explained fully to them.
Huh?
It is a condition that was explained fully to them. Particularly
explained,
yes.
Not consulted.
Well, maybe
discipline, if you tell a person consult, and do you expect them to say something?
Masol have been able to express contrary positions. And it is not an offense for Morena Nagibwana Homo in a different way. But the bottom line is here, honorable members, this is designed to allow for soldiers to be employed as you wish them to be employed. Otherwise, if we give them the entire hormone, then we must stop buying food. Then it means must be given time, irrespective of what is happening at that particular point in time. That's unattainable. And it is around where, okay, this principle, you hold it dear and hold on. Then we cannot give full subsistence allowance, or the cheaper form of it, committed subsistence allowance.
Okay, let's leave it there.
Yes.
For quite a spell, you have been assisting the wildlife in anti-poaching. But now there is an indication that anti-poaching is on the rise. Maybe the question would be, in your view, what might be the underlying challenges contributing to this trend, rise, anti-poaching, and what do you believe we as a nation should do to effectively combat this situation?
Thank you very much, Radio. Poaching is a function of a market. If the market exists, the incentive to poach will continue. Has BDF reduced its deployment and go into poaching? No. We've maintained the same force levels. In some cases, we've increased those force levels. and we've had significant interventions elsewhere. I've had, Kisara, that was your question, I have had insinuations as to poaching has increased because weaponry was taken from wildlife. I will say to you, we have very good relations with the Department of Wildlife and have operated very well, and I think we will operate very well, right from the leadership of one to the soldiers on the ground. But that concept of operation has never delivered one contact, and consequently cannot be a function it is something else. And the reason the understanding is poaching is now increasing, it will only be because the market increases. And the market increases, what it does is a national is incentivized to undertake a poaching trip, because just one poaching trip represents 10 times his annual income. 10 times his annual income. It's small money, but it's huge money relative to that individual. So we can put ourselves in that individual's foot. If there was a voice here saying to me, look, Commander, I'll pay you 10 times, just for one trip, I'll pay you 10 times your annual income. Please do this for me. It is a persuasive voice.
You may be tempted.
You may. You would have to have very, very, very strong principles around the ethos for which you believe to say no. So unless that is broken, poaching will exist. And it is not a function, certainly there's no interagency differences of opinion between ourselves, the wildlife.
The question I'm coming to now, I suppose, is not within your portfolio of responsibility. There is a challenge of buffaloes and elephants, which are destroying the cordon fence between Buteti and Makalamabeti. And they continue encroaching into the farming areas in Buteti. And this brew conflict, wildlife, human conflict. And the only threat that now people have is that this might lead to foot and mouth disease in Buteti, which will affect our economy as a country. As BDF, don't you have a role actually to assist, maybe driving these animals away from the farming areas? Now that you have a good relationship with wildlife, I suppose you also have with veterinary.
Indeed, we have an excellent relationship with Botswana Veterinary. We've gone on many operations with them. Just recently, the southern border with some of the facilitation, the border fence. Moreover, we were transporting a significant number of tonnage of fertilizer for the cropping season area. But you point out that this is not our mandate. It's a mandate that lies between two distinct ministries. One, they are wildlife, and the second, they are Ministry of Agriculture. They will be the lead as to the interventions that are required to be made. And we come in to facilitate those interventions, not on ourselves to decide. I think in just my opinion, I think it's not something that is achievable. We can do that, but it won't yield the results that we probably want.
If you are asked to help, you'll help, Commander, you're saying that?
Yes, but if we're asked to help, we'll help. Yes.
Can you have the last one, Honorable Dihwa? Last question. Or you are fine?
No.
Okay. Last question.
I still have 3 more questions.
Yeah, I will give you one. Thank you very much.
No, it's just a follow-up. Can I get to a follow-up? Because
just follow up. Just do the follow-up.
I'm asking this question, movement, wildlife to in farming areas, just because there is a challenge now in Buteti. Butcheries are closed because the moment elephants are seen in that area, veterinary home. So the butcher about Babula Gitala and the Kisem where as a Ra? Dinar, I mean to say. So,
Honorable Diva, I think wildlife will graze our meeting very soon.
Okay.
Maybe you should elaborate that.
The last question.
Follow it up with them.
The last question. Modern military operations, I'm told, they rely heavily on advanced technology and systems, which are increasingly vulnerable to cyber risks and other IT-related threats. How are you building internal capacity to address these threats? And does your current and future budget reflects the urgency and scale of the risk? I'm done.
How are we addressing it? Right from NDP 11. In other words, NDP 11 just in Ahela some 2 years back was a National Transitional Development Plan, Moro, NDP 12. What we call C5 ISR, CO Kibosi Bale 5, command, computer, communications, etc. Essentially, ICT is a function that really is key. We must develop it across the board. We must be able to, what does it do? It must be able to, or any platform your BDF used and deployed wherever it is, can be able to have a technical disposition that it sees and be able to transmit this to any other platform, BDF, wherever it might be. That makes it just immensely, it gives commanders an immense visual awareness. That has been capability here, but we infuse more our development plan. Recently, re-engaged not recently, 2 or 3 years back, we was engaged on Budgetary for a BDF-grown or a Botswana-grown defense enterprise system, which will then become the backbone of just the reports and returns and administering BDF. And further on, we are going to be developing this to become part of the backbone of that operational C5 ISR capability. And so it is important to develop it that way, because at the end of the day, you don't have any backdoor opportunities to go and buy off the shelf from some other vendor someplace else. But more importantly, it gives capability within Botswana by employees by Budgetary who are 100% Botswana, and the Budgetary itself is owned by Botswana. To have the technical competencies to understand it in great depth, and also to help grow the understanding around C4ISR as it keeps developing and keeps growing. So that is what is being what we're wanting to do. It is also a platform-based intervention. We need the platform. I was talking earlier on about drones and their accessibility to not just state actors, but non-state actors. It is important later on around drone technology. And even around drone technology, we've engaged in partnership with Botswana, with BUST. And we've had a project around the drone for them to study certain algorithms of being able to decipher the Polo Holo from Batu. That has gone on. It produced, I think, 4 master's degree qualified mason. We're now, the second part of it, phase of it, is to develop further insights into it, which should end up with 2 students with PhD qualifications. So those are some of the efforts that we're doing. It's not just exclusively with BUST. We have arrangements with the University of Botswana, and then also with Buang, particularly around animal behavior, and a discussion that I had with the Vice Chancellor, Professor Musipile, around animal behavior and how they can help us further understand and understand it from a behavioral science standpoint.
Thank you very much, General. Honorable Mabel, you have some interventions to seek to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tumela General. Kiwe anaurgi kitsalaga General Nankasi. Lina lardu tlumasa mo maswe kafuni le muserga ting kafarda sole ga lina garda sole jalo so ramo ibile hanele sentle ngaba kere dia ese hafulo lo madi une lo madi ate go go tlo dire ka gore ke bona gore wa leka. That being said, General, le fetsa gore ka di kolois a fleet for some of your senior officers, for Ranger Lead Fortuna jalo jalo go ntse jalo
re rekile di koloi a number of times. They're administrative vehicles. They're not military spec vehicles.
All right. Welfare. Arbiga welfare. Especially welfare ya masola bidang non-commissioned. Babakotas. Rabal. Bala welfare when go le bega ile gore ga le tsele go godimo. Arbiga dijo urile masole ba kgaolelo madimang go ba rekelwe dijo. Jano arbiga dijo a masola go ba ja sentle. A masola go ba para sentle.
Thank you very much. It's incorrect because it gives a different understanding. This, I said, is in line and in keeping with.
Okay, General. Let me withdraw. Ariel.
Yeah.
Let me withdraw that lefuk. Kere, amasola go ba ja sentle. General, nako ke tsa di karabo di latlhega mo boleleng ba go araba. I like how cool, calm and collected you are. I wish I was like you. I like your cool, calm demeanor. It's quite inspirational. But you're taking time now, Uriana. Are arabe ka bona go tle re fete. Amasola go ba ja sentle General le ba para sentle.
Karabo honorable member. Ke tshwanong gore ke go arabe ke le fully convinced gore ke go arabile botswene o mpotsa. How are you constraining her to worry? I'm short. Ke tla gore ke re ga baje sentle. And then there's no context. Ga baje sentle kaeng. We've had budgetary cuts. For example, the mo ngwageng o re ntse re tswa mo go one. Re kolota utilities, somewhere in the region of 400 million. 400 million. There were huge issues around for example, yes, Minister of Finance, Madi, good development in Lerenela, Madi, Ana, recurrent, also ladies are this, that, and the other. Minister of Finance said, much as we'd like to help, but that would be unlawful. So, so there are a number of issues that have obtained to Masolaskaja the menu that is prescribed, because there's a menu that is prescribed, and that menu that is prescribed has been evaluated by dietitians to make sure that the right calorific value is delivered to Lesotho appropriately. Uniform, the same thing, which is, again, going back to the very issues I spoke to around defense spending.
Right, I thank you. General, we dojite putsele gore o reketse your senior officers dikoloi ga ke tsora le prioritize sentle gore e be le gore le rekela se ha ke tlo ke karabo mo geo ga ke tsa gore welfare ya bana ba ga gorra ya masole a gago ba ba go tlase a go e lo no le go prioritize sentse prioritize the comfort of your senior officers. Artuel General, accommodation.
But Chairperson, because it gives a wrong
The General
wrong
would want to intervene. Please be brief, General.
Absolutely. Earlier on, if you don't buy capability, then we're just in an employing agency. The colo is very killing. Hadita Maharaka senior officers. The honorable member Angor Hangamo, to be able to deliver capability go one, because the same outcry Dijo is the same outcry airing Harare Nera di Sompero Seridiran Tirar Nagaso.
General, this guy can something I would say with like Tarbusakai accommodation. We say le felo le bidiwa malotwane le marina. Why is my fellow within the barracks? My fellow I see I met the Horbatwagan Namogon.
No, they are in a state in some cases of disrepair. Some came at Graneraha out of a what interventions are you doing to alleviate the problem? It certainly was a better situation than previously, which was the case. But are we saying it's appropriate? No. NDP 12 was trying to address those particular issues. NDP 12 had said, there's 24% of Masola Arona Anang in substandard accommodation, and we needed to remove and reduce that. And unfortunately, it is one of those areas that suffered cuts in the defense budgets.
Okay, General. But Wabanango no mafelo aki masolafing commissioned or non-commissioned?
Other rings, non-commissioned.
Other rings, non-commissioned. Once again, masolako tlase still have a nascent general. You need to prioritize and pay close attention to these. Kibone masola mantsi haba listen to haba nascent haba itumela rights. Thank you, General.
Are senior officers who are not living with respect to the housing standard.
I didn't hear that.
Yes, the Masola senior officers are sending at the appropriate housing policy at the requirements. So it's not exclusive. Anything bad, it can not other things.
Commander Okaru, Ubua Kaya Tamalitzingar, Baba Ninti, Mibaleva Kabunti Jabon, Banda Mahelo, Asam Releseri.
Gidualana Babans. make sure BDF these two branches differently. There are many interventions that we have done around these particular homes because for us, non-commissioned officers run CISOL. They are the primary instrument, human instrument, to which defense capability is procured. It is a leadership responsibility for us to deliver this. Now,
thank you, General.
There are some physical issues around fiscal constraints. If the fiscus is not there, it's not going to be delivered, honorable members.
I wish I could say General Rarabe. I thank you for your answers. Like I said, Nagirata Sole, I wish I could get Piragaluna. Tota Nagirata Soletat. So, General, I want to let Momatum can the current gas asbestos within your barracks.
I think the Malclassans assets are Giacopan thing. I eat some of the asbestos, but otherwise, I'm about to hear it's a about thing.
Yeah, Yamalo by show friends down here has asbestos.
Asbestos. No, it's a different type of house. Leon and Nailing, we are learn or in the really go expedite the Wahamatu. Aluminium, laminate no, it's not fiber. It's not fiber. Propane, at them. Propane, and then it's this material is highly flammable. Only now that we've that's what is laminated.
Okay.
Thank
you, sir. All right, thank you, sir.
Just a quick one. Aku panda matenga kwa orang anala best ajuris.
Na kaone reka matuko ko company awenela. Kione na kotsi ne ba ka matu yao ne re reka company ne ba ka matu ka home.
When are you facing it out?
Re batla wa destroy out. Wa destroy meaning comply with the health standards around ho Otahuansa. There are a few companies that are registered and approved to be able to do that.
Thank you, General. Now, asbestos, you'll face it out. Please, let's do that. You know how bad and dangerous it is for any human being. Physical proficiency test. When was the last time you did it, General? Yes, sir.
A while back. I can't quite remember. It's more than a year back.
Is it a requirement for promotion?
For me?
For Masole. Is it a requirement for promotion of Masole? Physical proficiency test?
It's a requirement for Masole from the rank up to major. For promotion beyond the rank up to major is selection by the president.
Okay. So is your promotion are they fair? Are the promoter fairly? Are you unfair?
I think they're fair. Every process could be said or it requires improvements, and that we will be open to. The promotion when I joined didn't have promotion boards. It had just a commanding officer recommending up and then a promotion effecting. This time around, there is right from the unit level, there's a whole team that, together with the commanding officer, is the commanding officer, the most senior enlisted member, and then the adjutant and maybe the second in command, who form a promotion board for that unit. Then it goes on to the formation, and the formation to the I think where there's a board also, and then the beyond that to the command, and then from the command to a board that is headed by the deputy commander, who then recommends to me. And at all of those boards, senior enlisted non-commissioned officers sit on those boards and review. And the standards are known to everybody around who needs to, how you get a promotion and how you would not be over. So those are known to everybody. And so can it be improved? I guess, as I say, everything can be improved. I don't want to say it's unfair, because I think it is quite clear that how do you end a promotion? And it's not just up to an individual.
Last one, Honorable Mabel.
All right, thank you. General, training public relations. You are very good. You are very good public relations. General, are we this proficiency test? I want to failing proficiency test, and if so, would you attribute it to data and nonsense, because yaka will continue so by failing would dietary deficiencies, would they have any contribution on them not doing well? Because
not that I know of. Part of that proficiency test, I think, in the score is also a body mass index. And the problem we're having with body mass index is already a lot of Masoda have too high a body mass index. So in other words, they are consuming too much calories relative to almost. So it will be surprising, or it's a function of the failure. I think it's attributable to the failure of physical proficiency test. Now, the physical proficiency test, we must make sure we understand clearly. It is not a test of a particular delivery at a certain skill sets. It's a baseline test. So it is the lowest level of physical fitness that you must maintain. If you're failing that, then you are not able to what we understand also about that is once having gone through basic military training, this level of physical fitness should not be a challenge. If you maintain throughout, it should never be a challenge. It can be a challenge if, for some reason, your medical proficiency has been downgraded, it could be a challenge around there.
Thank you.
And then it could be a challenge thereafter or more to gain other proficiency.
Thank you, General. Honorable Mtausani.
Thank you, Chairman. Me ke kopa go gongwe ke botsegela gone gore mme bone ba ba nnang ko mantlong a di-asbestos a lete le nne le gone gore le ka ba testa how oftenly gore le bone gore a mme ba botsogo ba bone ba bo siame.
Gone ga re ise ko re nne le a structured testing process. Ya ba ba kileng ba nna le hormone. Re kile ra nna le sole le nne le retirile. Le nne la eventually la presenta ka bolwetse bone bo le attributable to asbestos, contact with asbestos. And then as an in a brick and mortar building. Me the office it's in a good thing. It was found out later material that contained asbestos. And and so go ka tswa go anamegile ka lone lebaka leo re le BDF gone no ga re tsaya lebaka gore re amogela but ne ra hela re amogetse gore we could be liable. Unfortunately, gone mme a setse a re tlogetse. Asbestos, and the way I understand it is gore eka ya ka nna ke tsene go sekoleng se ne se classroom ya ka ne le asbestos go secondary school gongwe ke sala ke tsere ko e tla re dingwageng tse dingwe e be ke presenta ka bolwetse bo mme ga o ntesta gompieno e le gore ke siame ya ka ke ne ke bua ka ga masole a teng a retirile be re mo isagong a retirile ba presenta ka bolwetse bo hateng bo go supegang gore bo amana le sesole. So nya ha rena a structured testing program, and then one of the things is gore total how ka testa gongwe test di tlo gonna dira ga gona sepe me gone gona e le gore e tla re mo isagong e bo supega gore gone ne gona le seng.
Thank you, Commander. But now that you are able to see long-term effects, don't you think you need to put up some measures where, or an insurance kind of, so much that if one of you who are retiring, maybe the cost and asbestos, you know, something like for instance, but body mining, there's this silicosis disease that is giving our communities a very big problem. Make it they are detected, but what they must not about. So just to have some kind of insurance in or hamu to alcohol, if stanga na si super honor me in elio ne kanya ya asbestos or baha bonekana. Just as a thought.
Insurance thing, or the BDF Act speaks to disability pay. And disability is Zamarana Hapele le death on duty, even though asbestos hota tamara hungaka kaskaiso susupa. Mehara hona hoka itzahala moto o bola ile go bolwetse bo tsamalana le asbestos maybe le bolwetse bo really BDF re na le gore ke rona re ka tswa re mo sense BDF the provisions that di am cover ora ba ga bone le bone ba bone terminal benefits tse di tsamalana le bokwabo.
Thank you, but Chairman, what I interest Nagamu to read figure, tell me, say, I want me, get on what Tatak or has a BDF for hell. But get on what Tatak the section of accounting where there is always overpayments, more salary, or any other loss of money by government, we can toko. Gore hamuto akolota aduele on time kantele you are chasing them what are you doing to close these gaps? Because when I look at the figures here, I see quite a number of no recoveries, and these no recoveries you find huge sums of money. Telling me they are going to be write-offs. Kana right of like but at the end of the day it's a loss to government revenue. So what measures are you putting in place to try and close the gaps? Thank you.
Let him just answer this one, then I can
Thank you very much. Honorable Chair Ramutausan. One big thing is this is not an automated process, so it's a whole human processed activity. So it's really difficult to be 100% efficient. So the whole kilo anale program ya governmente in the Irana DPSM, but it was to automate the HR function. And Leonardo BDF, we were part of that function. I can give earlier on about that defense enterprise system. It will have a module around this, particularly so that it can be able to flag individuals. November gore flag gore ke ka tswa ke kolota sele e le ka tsatsi la teng ha ke re ke a tsamaya be gote me duela tsele kapo kolutiwa tsele because it's not just a function ya gore when out the individual a kolota but also the individual ha ka tswa koluti.
Thank you very much, General. Thank you, Honorable Mtausani. I guess we have covered quite some ground. We were quite very slow, yes, partly because the General would take a question and write it down. That obviously took away a lot of time. But even members, honorable members had a lot of questions to ask, so one would understand why we took so much time with the BDF. In any case, because we are looking at 21, 22 books, this was just an opportunity to give us a window into the present and the future. So I think it was well worth it. Just as a way of concluding the narrative, yes, General, how Buaka, in your executive summary, how Buaka, our capabilities as a defense force, Buaka, air defense capabilities, ground maneuver capabilities, we like a civic defense capabilities. They are almost all compromised. This is a very sad situation for any country, but we also would want to, and this is not a question, it's just a comment to say, in situations like this, it may be possible now to prioritize the area that you wish to excel on, and then the other areas, because of lack of money, and everybody's talking about lack of money nowadays. So, prioritize. Compromise the security of the nation. But really, if you talk about choices and priorities, there are other competing demands in this country. But we don't want to land ourselves in a situation where the defense force become an employment agency. I think we will not get to that. But what is quite surprising and actually even embarrassing is that the national security dialogue is not on at a time when we are facing so many challenges. I think it is up to us, members of Parliament, to see how we can encourage our principals and how we can deliver some of these issues on the floor of Parliament, so that the national security dialogue takes effect against the background of these dwindling resources in our country.
In truth, government has instituted it, so there is progress going on. Or maybe now I was expressing it out of an institutional frustration or okay. But
there's some movement in the right direction. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Some of the things that are contained in the BDF Act of 2018, they are not in place. That will not augur well for a security outfit. they are not in place, they are contained in the BDF Act of 2018. They will be put in place. Mozambique welfare of soldiers who tule rights gore mapalamente ba dumela gore le ha tota go ngwena e le gore tiro ya go etona ke go itebaganya le ba ba theogetseng gompieno mme ha ke re batho ba ne ba ntse ba bereka go go wena e be re morago hela yanong ha hetse ba le konte e be nna ke to ka re interest ya go nne kalo because statutorily how mandate go dira yalo. I think somehow we should be talking about how you as the commander o ka interacta ka teng le batho ba ba setseng ba togetse wa se sole ka gore go bua nnete most of them like you have indicated retire into poverty bangwe ba ne ba ntse ba kgona go duela di medical aid a kry anong ga ba sena go tswa ga ba kgone go di duela yaanong go raya gore seemo sa teng se wala ko tlase le go gaisa sa botsogo hela jalo ke re ke dingwe tsa dilo tse e leng gore gongwe le tshwanetse la nna active in terms of thinking around them gore e se ka re motho a ne a diretse legatse ka lebaka le lekana bo e re morago gore mmona jaanong a le mo seemong se se ntseng jalo yone the Veterans Affairs Office nna ke dumela gore wena you have seconded people there but also take active interest mo go yone gore bona gore e thusa yang our veterans. But all in all, more narrative here, Lutule, I will exercise license, we will break for tea. That means then, members, be ready for that. Thank you very much. We can now go for tea and then come back for the financials. Thank you very much.